I stood frozen in the boardroom, watching my career crumble before my eyes. The presentation I'd spent weeks perfecting was displayed on the screen, but something was horribly wrong. Melinda, my manager, had taken over my laptop without asking. She clicked through my slides with a fake smile plastered across her face, then stopped at my financial analysis section. "I'm sorry, everyone," she announced to the clients, "but I think we need to address some concerns about Aubrey's data accuracy here." My stomach dropped. The numbers on the screen were completely different from what I'd prepared. Client representatives from Morrison Financial exchanged confused glances. Mr. Patterson, their CEO, squinted at the projections I'd supposedly created. My hands trembled as I tried to speak, but my throat had gone completely dry. "These calculations are frankly embarrassing," Melinda continued, shaking her head with theatrical disappointment. "Aubrey clearly isn't ready for leadership responsibilities if she can't even double-check basic figures." The room spun around me, my vision blurred with humiliation as everyone stared. But then I noticed something strange. Mr. Patterson was frowning, not at me, but at the screen. He'd reviewed my original report yesterday and praised it extensively. Melinda's finger slipped on the touchpad. For one brief second, I saw the file properties flash on screen. "Last modified, this morning, by Melinda Green." I stumbled into the restroom, barely making it to a stall before my knees gave out. The cool tile floor pressed against my palms as I crouched there, trying desperately not to cry. My reflection in the polished metal partition showed a woman on the verge of breaking apart completely. "I worked 3 years for that promotion," I whispered to no one, my voice cracking on the last word. 3 years of 60-hour weeks. 3 years of sacrificing weekends and holidays. 3 years of proving myself over and over again, only to be publicly destroyed in front of our biggest clients. The promotion to Senior Account Director was supposed to be announced next month. I'd been assured I was the top candidate. I pressed my forehead against the cool wall, forcing myself to breathe slowly. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Just like my therapist taught me. My hands were still shaking uncontrollably. Then I heard it, laughter echoing through the restroom entrance. Melinda's voice, high and delighted, carried clearly from just outside the door. "Did you see her face?" Melinda said to someone. "Absolutely priceless. She actually thought she had a chance." 2 weeks earlier, everything had seemed normal. I'd arrived at my desk that Tuesday morning with coffee in hand, ready to finalize the Morrison Financial presentation. But when I opened the file, my heart sank. Entire sections of client notes had vanished, detailed specifications that Mr. Patterson himself had provided during our last meeting. I frantically searched my computer, checking every folder twice. Those notes represented hours of careful documentation. Without them, my analysis would be incomplete and potentially incorrect. "Everything okay, Aubrey?" Melinda appeared beside my desk, her expression dripping with fake concern. She touched my shoulder gently, tilting her head like a sympathetic friend. "My client notes disappeared," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "The ones from the Patterson meeting last week." "Oh, sweetie, that's awful," she cooed. "But are you sure you actually saved them? You've seemed pretty distracted lately." Her words stung, but I didn't argue. Instead, I spent my lunch hour reconstructing everything from memory. Later that afternoon, while emptying my computer's trash folder, I found something that made my blood run cold. There was my original file, deleted that morning at 6:47 a.m., 30 minutes before I'd even arrived at the office. The modification history showed Melinda's username. Several key sections had been altered before deletion. I stared at the screen, then quietly restored the file to a hidden backup folder. Something wasn't right. The following Wednesday, I was summoned to Melinda's office for what she called a routine performance check-in. The moment I sat down, I knew this wasn't routine at all. Her desk was covered with printed emails and reports, all flagged with yellow sticky notes. "I'm concerned, Aubrey," she began, clasping her hands together. We've received some complaints from clients about your communication style. They feel you're not responsive enough to their needs. My mind raced through every client interaction from the past month. I'd been meticulous about response times, often replying within an hour of receiving any message. Which clients? I asked carefully. I'd like to understand specifically what I need to improve. Melinda's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. I can't disclose that information, it would compromise client confidentiality, but trust me, the feedback has been consistent. Can I see the actual complaints, even with names redacted? That won't be necessary, just take my word for it, and do better going forward. After the meeting, I returned to my desk feeling sick. At the coffee station, Marcus, one of our junior coordinators, caught my eye. He glanced around nervously, then leaned close. For what it's worth, he whispered. I handle client satisfaction surveys. Nobody's complained about you. Nobody. My heart sank like a stone. Melinda was building a false case against me, creating problems that didn't exist. The email from HR arrived on a Friday afternoon, marked as high importance. They'd be announcing the promotion decision in exactly 1 month. All candidates should prepare for final evaluations and ensure their project portfolios were current. I was reviewing my achievements list when Melinda appeared at my cubicle. You look exhausted, Aubrey, she said with exaggerated sympathy. Why don't you head home early today? Get some rest before the weekend. Something in her tone made me uneasy, but I was genuinely tired. I gathered my belongings and left, grateful for the unexpected break. But halfway home, I realized I'd forgotten my apartment keys on my desk. The office was nearly empty when I returned. Most people had left for the weekend. I approached my cubicle quietly, not wanting to disturb anyone still working. That's when I heard Melinda's voice drifting from her office. Her door was slightly ajar. Don't worry about Aubrey, she was telling someone, probably on the phone. Her tone was completely different, cold, calculating, nothing like the sweet concern she always showed me. She has absolutely no idea how easy she is to replace. By this time next month, she'll be lucky if she still has her current position, let alone a promotion. I froze in the hallway, barely breathing. My keys could wait. I backed away slowly, making sure my footsteps didn't echo on the tile floor. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Melinda's strategy unfold with horrifying clarity. She'd started grooming Shauna, a co-worker who joined our department just 8 months ago. Suddenly, Shauna was getting assigned to all the high-profile projects, the exact ones I'd typically handle. During team meetings, Melinda would ask Shauna to present updates on accounts I'd been managing for years. When I'd offer input based on my client relationships, Melinda would cut me off mid-sentence, saying we needed to let fresh perspectives shine. The breaking point came during lunch on a Thursday. I was eating at my desk when Shauna stopped by, unusually chatty. We'd always been friendly, though not particularly close. She was talking about her weekend plans when something slipped out. I'm checking out apartments in the nicer part of downtown, she said excitedly. Melinda told me the promotion is basically mine, so I'll definitely be able to afford the rent increase. She froze, realizing what she'd just revealed. Her eyes went wide with panic. I mean, she said I have a good chance, Shauna backtracked quickly. Nothing's definite, obviously. Of course, I replied, keeping my expression perfectly neutral, my voice light and unconcerned. Good luck with the apartment search. Inside, I was screaming. But I'd learned something crucial. Showing emotion would only make this worse. I kept my face calm, even smiled a little. On Monday morning, one of my oldest clients called, furious. Mr. Henderson from Apex Industries practically shouted through the phone about ignored instructions and missed deadlines. According to him, he'd sent 3 urgent emails over the past week that I'd completely disregarded. Mr. Henderson, I never received any emails from you, I said carefully, already pulling up my inbox to search. Let me check my records. Well, I certainly sent them, he snapped. Check your spam folder or wherever incompetent people lose important messages. After apologizing profusely and promising to resolve his concerns immediately, I hung up and dove into my email settings. I checked spam, trash everywhere, nothing from Henderson. But that was impossible. Our email system logged all incoming messages, even ones that bounced. Then I found it, buried in my account's filter settings. Someone had created a rule that automatically moved emails containing certain keywords to a hidden folder, then marked them as read. The keywords included urgent, Henderson, Apex, and several other client-specific terms. My hands shook as I examined the filter properties. Creation date, 3 weeks ago, created by MG, Melinda Green's initials. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. This wasn't just sabotage anymore. This was systematic, calculated destruction of my professional reputation. Every missed email would make me look careless and incompetent. I took screenshots of everything, saved them to my personal cloud storage, then quietly deleted the filter. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, anger burning through my chest. Part of me wanted to march into the office tomorrow and confront Melinda in front of everyone, expose her manipulation and lies. But another part, the smarter part, knew that would be exactly what she wanted. She'd twist it somehow, make me look unhinged and unprofessional. She'd already laid groundwork suggesting I wasn't stable or leadership material. Instead, I got up at 3 a.m. and started organizing. I created a detailed timeline of every suspicious incident, every altered file, every missing email. I printed backup copies of my original work and stored them in a locked drawer at home. I documented Melinda's contradictory statements, saved every passive-aggressive email she'd sent. The next morning, I arrived at work early and quietly began creating redundant backups of everything. I discovered more altered files, reports where my conclusions had been changed to make recommendations that contradicted client needs, financial analyses where numbers had been subtly shifted to make my projections look unrealistic. When Melinda stopped by my desk around 9, I had my game face ready. She asked how I was doing with my current projects. "Everything's great," I said brightly, smiling like nothing was wrong. "Really hitting my stride lately." Her expression flickered with something I couldn't quite identify. Disappointment, maybe. She'd been expecting me to crack. Mr. Walters from accounting was someone I barely knew. We'd exchanged pleasantries in the elevator occasionally, but nothing more. So when he approached my desk on a random Tuesday afternoon, I was surprised. "Aubrey, could I speak with you privately?" he asked quietly, glancing around. "Maybe the conference room on the 3rd floor? It's usually empty this time of day." My pulse quickened, but I nodded and followed him. Once we were alone with the door closed, he pulled out a thin folder. "I've been with this company 23 years, he began, his weathered face serious. "I've seen a lot of questionable things, but I've always minded my own business. However, I can't ignore what I've been noticing lately." He opened the folder, revealing spreadsheets covered in highlighted discrepancies. "There are strange inconsistencies in Melinda's department reports," he explained. "Numbers that don't match our master financial records. At first, I thought it was simple data entry errors, but the patterns are too consistent." He slid several pages across the table. "These are archived client statements from 6 months ago. Compare them to the versions Melinda presented to the CEO in her quarterly reviews." I studied the documents carefully. The differences were subtle. A percentage point here, a revenue figure there. But they were definitely present, always making Melinda's department appear more profitable than it actually was. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because I think you're being set up to take the fall," he said bluntly. I spent the entire weekend comparing every document Mr. Walters had given me with Melinda's official reports. The pattern was unmistakable. She'd been systematically misrepresenting financial data for months, maybe longer. The amounts were small enough that they might not trigger immediate audits, but consistent enough to paint a false picture of departmental success. Sabotaged. The worst part was discovering how she'd positioned these numbers. Several reports included my name as a contributing analyst, even for quarters when I'd had no involvement with those particular accounts. If anyone ever investigated, I'd look complicit. My hands trembled as I highlighted another discrepancy. This wasn't just about my promotion anymore. This was potential fraud. If the company made budget decisions based on false information, stakeholders could suffer real financial harm. Monday morning, I arrived early to continue documenting everything. I was deep in concentration, comparing quarterly statements, when Melinda's voice made me jump. "Working hard, I see," she said, appearing suddenly beside my desk. I quickly minimized my windows, pulling up a random client email instead. "Just catching up on correspondence," I said casually. "What were you looking at just now?" Her eyes were sharp, suspicious. "Henderson's account reconciliation, making sure everything's accurate after that communication mix-up." She stepped closer, reaching for my mouse. "Let me see." "It's all set," I interrupted, pulling my keyboard towards me protectively. The next day, Melinda called me into her office with an expression of exaggerated concern. She gestured to the chair across from her desk, then actually came around to perch on the edge of the desk beside me. An obvious power move disguised as casual friendliness. "Aubrey, sweetie, I'm really worried about you," she began, placing her hand on my shoulder in what was probably supposed to be a comforting gesture. It felt more like a threat. "Your workload seems to be overwhelming you lately. I've noticed you staying late, looking stressed. I think maybe we've given you too much responsibility too quickly." "I'm managing fine," I said evenly. "Are you, though?" She squeezed my shoulder slightly. "It's okay to admit when things are too much. That's not weakness. That's self-awareness." Her other hand drifted toward my computer mouse. "Why don't we review your current projects together? I can help redistribute some tasks." I watched her fingers move closer to my keyboard. She wanted access to my desktop, wanted to see what I'd been working on. My heart pounded, but I kept my expression neutral. "I actually have a client call in 5 minutes," I said, glancing at my watch. "Can we schedule this for later?" Her smile tightened. "Of course." What she didn't know was that I'd changed all my passwords 2 days ago. Even if she tried to access my files remotely using her manager credentials, she'd find herself locked out. The email from HR arrived Wednesday morning. Performance review meeting mandatory attendance. My stomach clenched as I read the details. Melinda had filed an official performance concern, triggering a formal review process. The meeting room felt smaller than usual. 2 HR representatives sat across from me, Ms. Rodriguez and Mr. Kim. Melinda sat to the side, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes gleaming with barely concealed satisfaction. "Aubrey, we need to discuss some concerns about your recent performance," Ms. Rodriguez began, sliding a document across the table. "Your manager has documented several incidents of missed deadlines, client complaints, and data accuracy issues." I scanned the document quickly. Every incident listed was either fabricated or exaggerated beyond recognition. The missed deadlines were projects I'd completed early. The client complaints were from people who'd never expressed dissatisfaction. The data accuracy issues were referring to the files Melinda herself had altered. "We need you to sign this acknowledgement," Mr. Kim said, pushing the paper closer. "It confirms you're aware of these performance issues and commit to improvement." I read it again carefully. Signing would mean accepting responsibility for problems I didn't cause. It would create an official record of incompetence that could follow me anywhere. "I can't sign this," I said quietly but firmly. The room went silent. Melinda's eyes widened slightly. "These incidents aren't accurate representations of my work. I'd like to request a formal review with documentation." Miss Rodriguez and Mr. Kim exchanged uncomfortable glances. I barely made it home before the emotions crashed over me. I sat on my couch in the dark, still wearing my work clothes, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on my chest. 3 years of dedication reduced to this nightmare. 3 years of proving myself, all being erased by someone who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I forced them back. "This isn't anger," I whispered to the empty apartment. "This is evidence. Stay focused. Document everything." My phone buzzed with an email notification. Even before I looked, I knew it would be bad news. I was right. Melinda had reassigned the Morrison financial account, my biggest client, the one I'd built a relationship with over 2 years, to Shauna. Effective immediately. The email was professionally worded, citing my current performance concerns and the need to ensure client satisfaction during this transition period. But I could read between the lines. She was stripping away everything I'd built, piece by piece. I walked to my home office and opened the locked filing cabinet where I'd been storing evidence. The folder had grown thick over the past few weeks. Screenshots, printed emails, financial discrepancies, timeline documentation. Every lie, every manipulation, carefully preserved. My hands stopped shaking as I organized the papers. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about justice. Friday afternoon, CEO Howard Ellington called a department-wide meeting. These gatherings were rare, usually reserved for major announcements or company-wide initiatives. Everyone crowded into the largest conference room, speculation buzzing through the air. Mr. Ellington stood at the front, his presence commanding immediate silence. "I wanted to personally review our departmental performance before we finalize next quarter's budget allocations," he announced. "Melinda, would you present your team's numbers?" Melinda practically glowed as she connected her laptop to the projector. Her presentation was polished, impressive, showing remarkable growth in client revenue and operational efficiency. The charts displayed consistent upward trends, positioning our department as the company's star performer. I sat in the back row watching those numbers flash across the screen, and my blood ran cold. I recognized them. They were the doctored figures from her quarterly reports, the ones Mr. Walters had helped me identify as inconsistent with actual financial records. "These results are exceptional, Melinda," Mr. Ellington said, making notes. "This level of performance will definitely factor into our annual budget planning. I'm thinking we can justify significant resource allocation to your department based on this trajectory." Duck. He was going to make major financial decisions based on false information. The company would commit resources to imaginary growth, potentially creating real financial problems down the line. I sat there, evidence folder metaphorically burning a hole in my bag, and said nothing. Not yet. That weekend, I didn't leave my apartment. I spread every piece of evidence across my dining table, organizing it into a comprehensive case. Timestamps showing when files were altered. Email filters designed to sabotage my client communications. Performance reviews that contradicted my actual work history. Financial discrepancies between real numbers and reported figures. But the most damning evidence came when I cross-referenced dates on altered forms. Someone had changed submission dates on client contracts to make it appear projects were completed later than they actually were, creating false patterns of delay. The modification timestamps proved these changes were deliberate, not accidental. I created a master timeline that showed how all these pieces fit together, a systematic campaign to destroy my credibility while simultaneously inflating departmental performance through fraudulent reporting. As I worked, the anger that had been burning in my chest transformed into something cooler, sharper. This wasn't about my promotion anymore. This was about protecting the company from someone who was actively harming it. This was about making sure Melinda couldn't do to anyone else what she'd done to me. I labelled each section clearly, attached supporting documentation, and created an executive summary that laid out the key findings without unnecessary emotion or accusation. Just facts. Just evidence. "This is bigger than my promotion," I whispered, staring at the completed binder sitting on my table. Monday morning, Melinda called me into her office with what she termed a mentor conversation. Her demeanour was different today. Less aggressive, more disappointed teacher vibe. She gestured for me to sit and settled into her chair with a heavy sigh. "Aubrey, I've been thinking a lot about your career path," she began, her voice dripping with false concern. "And I want to be honest with you, as someone who cares about your professional development." She leaned forward, folding her hands on her desk. "Leadership isn't for everyone. That's not a criticism. It's just reality. Some people are excellent contributors without needing to be in charge. And I think that's where your strengths lie." I kept my expression neutral, but my jaw clenched involuntarily. "My advice, as someone with more experience, is to accept that management might not be your calling. Be grateful for the position you have. There's dignity in being a solid team member." The condescension in her voice was almost impressive in its subtlety. She was telling me to give up, to stop reaching for advancement, to accept my place beneath her. "The promotion decision meeting is tomorrow, actually," she added, almost as an afterthought. "I wanted you to hear this from me first, so you're not disappointed when the announcement comes." She'd accidentally revealed the exact timing. The meeting was tomorrow, which meant I had less than 24 hours. That afternoon, HR sent me an updated performance review to sign before the promotion decision. I opened the attachment with a sinking feeling that proved justified. The ratings were brutally low across every category: leadership potential, client relations, technical skills, reliability. According to this document, I was barely competent at my current level, let alone ready for advancement. But I had something Melinda didn't know about. 3 months ago, during my standard mid-year review, I'd received excellent ratings. I'd saved a copy to my personal email, just as I did with all important documents. I pulled up both versions and compared them side by side. The original review praised my client relationships, called my technical skills exceptional, and specifically noted my leadership potential. This new version read like it described a completely different employee. The modification date on the new document was yesterday. Someone had gone into the system and retroactively altered my official performance history. I took screenshots of both versions highlighting the discrepancies. The original signatures were still visible on the first document, proving it had been the official record before someone changed it. I added these pages to my evidence binder, which had grown to over 50 pages of documented proof. Tomorrow was the promotion meeting. Tomorrow they'd announce Shauna as the new senior account director based on false performance data and fabricated concerns. Unless I did something tonight. The conference room was decorated with celebratory balloons. Someone had brought pastries. The whole scene felt surreal. A party for my professional funeral. I sat near the back as the HR team prepared their announcement presentation. Miss Rodriguez stood at the front, smiling warmly at everyone. "Thank you all for being here. As you know, we've been evaluating candidates for the Senior Account Director position. The decision wasn't easy, but we're confident we've selected the right person to lead this department forward." Shauna was practically vibrating with excitement 2 seats over. Melinda sat beside her, already beaming with pride. "After careful consideration of performance reviews, client feedback, and leadership potential, we're pleased to announce that Shauna Williams will be our new Senior Account Director." Applause filled the room. Shauna stood accepting congratulations from everyone around her. I clapped mechanically, keeping my face carefully neutral, even forcing a smile. Inside, I felt hollow. Mr. Ellington himself was present, which was unusual. He stood to speak, holding a copy of Melinda's departmental reports. "Shauna's promotion is well-deserved, especially given the exceptional growth metrics from this department. Melinda's leadership has clearly created an environment where talent flourishes." He was congratulating them using Melinda's doctored numbers. The whole celebration was built on fraud. As people began gathering their things to leave, I approached Mr. Ellington quietly. "Mr. Ellington, could I speak with you privately for just 5 minutes? It's important." Mr. Ellington looked surprised but nodded. We stepped into a small office down the hall. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single page, the executive summary I'd prepared, showing key discrepancies between reported numbers and actual financial records. "Sir, these are figures you personally approved last week during the budget allocation meeting," I said calmly, pointing to specific numbers. "And these are the actual account balances from the same period." He took the paper, studying it carefully. The colour gradually drained from his face as he recognised the implications. These weren't small errors. These were systematic misrepresentations that he'd based major financial decisions on. "Where did you get these numbers?" he asked, his voice tight. "From archived financial statements in our own system. I have documentation showing the original data and the altered versions presented to you." He looked at me with new intensity, really seeing me for the first time. "Do you have more of this?" "Yes, sir. Much more." He glanced at his watch, then back at the paper in his hands. His jaw was clenched, a vein visible at his temple. "War, come to my office right now and bring everything you have." The walk to the executive floor felt surreal. Other employees stared as I passed, probably wondering why someone from Melinda's department was heading to the CEO's private office with a thick binder under her arm. Mr. Ellington's office was intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive furniture, walls covered with awards and company history. He gestured to the conference table in the corner rather than his massive desk, creating a slightly less formal atmosphere. I laid out my evidence methodically. Financial discrepancies first, the doctored quarterly reports, the misrepresented client revenues, the altered budget projections. I showed him archived statements alongside Melinda's versions, letting the numbers speak for themselves. Then I moved to the performance review alterations, showing him my original mid-year evaluation compared to the recently modified version. I explained the email filters that had been set up to make me miss client communications. He said nothing, just examined each document with increasing intensity. His expression grew darker with every page. At one point, he picked up his phone and made a brief call. "Cancel my afternoon meetings, all of them." When I showed him the timeline of systematic sabotage, how Melinda had deliberately undermined my work while building a false case against me, he actually stood up and walked to the window, his back rigid. "How long has this been happening?" he asked without turning around. "The financial misrepresentation. At least 6 months that I can prove. The sabotage against me specifically. About 2 months, intensifying as the promotion decision approached." He turned back to face me. "You documented all of this yourself?" "Yes, sir. With help from Mr. Walters in accounting, who first noticed the financial inconsistencies." "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" "I needed to be certain. I needed evidence that couldn't be dismissed or explained away." Within an hour, Mr. Ellington's office had transformed into a war room. He'd summoned Catherine Torres, our general counsel, and both senior HR representatives. They spread my evidence across his conference table, examining every document with grim expressions. I sat quietly in the corner, answering questions when asked, but otherwise staying out of the way. This was no longer about me. It was about protecting the company from liability. These modifications were made under Melinda Green's system login, Mr. Kim from HR confirmed, checking digital timestamps on his laptop. Multiple files, altered over several months, and these performance documents were definitely changed after they'd been officially filed. Catherine Torres, the general counsel, was particularly focused on the financial discrepancies. If budget decisions were made based on fraudulent reporting, we could have serious regulatory issues. The board will need to be informed immediately. Miss Rodriguez pulled up Melinda's personnel file. "She's been with the company 11 years, exemplary record until now, no previous complaints or concerns." "That we know of," Catherine said darkly. "I want to review every employee who's left her department in the past 5 years. Check if there are patterns we missed." Mr. Ellington made another call. "Send Melinda Green to my office immediately. No, don't explain why. Just get her here now." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what was coming. After 20 minutes of tense waiting, there was a knock at the door. Melinda walked in, her expression confused and slightly annoyed at being summoned. Then she saw the assembled group, and all my documents spread across the table. Her face went pale. "Melinda, please." "Sit down," Mr. Ellington said, his voice unnaturally calm. That controlled tone was somehow more frightening than anger would have been. She sat, but her eyes kept darting to the evidence on the table. I watched her mentally calculating, trying to figure out which lie might work. "These are your departmental reports from the last 2 quarters, Catherine began, sliding several pages toward her. "Do you recognize them?" "Of course. Those are my standard performance summaries. And these numbers are accurate?" "Yes, absolutely. I'm meticulous about data integrity." Catherine nodded slowly, then placed the archived financial statements beside them. "Then why do these numbers from our accounting department tell a completely different story?" Melinda's composed facade cracked slightly. "I don't know what you mean. There must be some confusion." "There's no confusion," Mr. Ellington interrupted. "The numbers you reported are false. You've been systematically misrepresenting this department's financial performance for months." "That's ridiculous. I would never—" "We have modification timestamps showing you altered these documents," Mr. Kim added. "Your login, your access credentials, your digital signature." Melinda's eyes found me in the corner. The look she gave me was pure venom. "This is her doing, isn't it? Aubrey's been unstable lately, making accusations." "Actually," Miss Rodriguez interrupted, "we found your email discussing plans to eliminate Aubrey as competition for the promotion. We found the filter you created to redirect her client communications. We found performance reviews you altered after they'd been officially submitted." "They brought in Shauna next." She looked terrified, refusing to make eye contact with Melinda. Under gentle questioning, she admitted Melinda had coached her, promised her the promotion, asked her to make certain statements about my performance that weren't true. Melinda tried to maintain her innocence for another 20 minutes, but the evidence was overwhelming, and eventually even she realized there was no talking her way out of this. "Effective immediately. Your employment is terminated," Mr. Ellington said flatly. "Security will escort you from the building. You'll be contacted by legal regarding potential criminal charges." The room cleared out slowly after Melinda was escorted away by security. I remained seated, emotionally exhausted, watching the city through those massive windows. Mr. Ellington returned after seeing everyone out, closing the door behind him. "Aubrey," he began, sitting across from me, "I owe you an enormous apology. This happened on my watch. We failed to protect you from a hostile work environment." "Thank you, sir. I'd like to offer you the Senior Account Director position, immediately, with a formal apology added to your personnel file and compensation for what you endured." It was everything I'd worked for, the promotion I'd sacrificed 3 years to earn, the recognition I deserved. But as I sat there, looking at this man who'd signed off on fraudulent reports without questioning them, who'd let Melinda operate unchecked for who knows how long, I realized something crucial. "I appreciate that, Mr. Ellington, I really do, but I'm going to have to decline." His eyebrows rose in surprise. "Decline?" "I don't want to work somewhere I had to survive sabotage just to be considered competent. I don't want to spend my career wondering if the systems protecting me are actually working, or if I'll need to document everything just to prove my worth." I stood, gathering my bag. This company needs serious cultural changes. Until that happens, I can't stay here. I deserve better. I pulled an envelope from my bag, my resignation letter which I'd written last night just in case. "Thank you for taking my evidence seriously, but I'm done." The following week felt surreal. I'd cleaned out my desk, said goodbye to the colleagues I actually liked, and walked away from the company I'd devoted 3 years of my life to. Part of me felt guilty for leaving. Another part felt lighter than I had in months. My phone rang constantly with job offers. Apparently, word had spread quickly about what happened. Several companies were interested in someone who demonstrated both professional integrity and the backbone to stand up to corruption. I accepted a position at Sterling Associates, a competitor firm that had been trying to recruit me for months. My starting salary was 15% higher than the promotion at my old company would have paid. They offered better benefits, flexible working arrangements, and a culture that actually seemed to value ethical behavior. On my first day, I met my new team. They welcomed me warmly, showing me around their modern offices. My new manager, Patricia, seemed genuinely invested in developing her team members rather than competing with them. "We're excited to have you here," she said during my orientation. "Your reputation for client relations and analytical precision is exactly what we need for our expansion plans." By the end of the week, I was assigned to lead a major client acquisition project, bigger than anything I'd handled before. Standing in my new office, looking out at a different city skyline, I finally felt like I could breathe again. 2 months later, I heard through former colleagues that Melinda was facing legal consequences. The company's audit had uncovered even more financial misrepresentation than I'd found. Several departments were being investigated. The board had implemented new oversight procedures and mandatory ethics training. Shauna had been demoted back to her original position. Mr. Walters had been commended for his role in identifying the discrepancies and was given a special recognition award. My former company tried to reach out twice, offering me increased compensation and assurances that things had changed. I politely declined both times. Some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. At Sterling Associates, I was thriving. The client project I'd been assigned had exceeded all expectations, bringing in 3 new major accounts. Patricia nominated me for a leadership development program, and I was selected. Real mentorship felt completely different from what I'd experienced with Melinda. It was supportive, honest, focused on actual growth rather than control. One afternoon, Marcus from my old company messaged me, "You inspired a lot of us. 5 people from the department have left since you did. We realized we didn't have to accept toxic environments either." That message meant more to me than any promotion ever could. I thought about recording a video, sharing my story publicly, but decided against it. Not every victory needs to be broadcast. Some lessons are personal. What mattered was that I'd learned my worth couldn't be determined by someone else's insecurity or manipulation. I'd learned that documentation and patience were more powerful than anger. I'd learned that walking away from what doesn't serve you isn't quitting, it's choosing yourself. 6 months after leaving, I received an invitation to speak at a professional women's conference about workplace advocacy. Standing at that podium, looking at hundreds of faces in the audience, I shared my story, not for revenge, but to help others recognize the signs I'd missed at first. "Know your worth," I told them, my voice steady and strong. "Document everything. Trust your instincts, and never be afraid to choose environments that celebrate your talents instead of sabotaging them. You don't owe loyalty to people who undermine you. You owe yourself the chance to flourish." The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Afterward, dozens of women approached me with their own stories of workplace sabotage, of managers who felt threatened, of dreams deferred because someone else feared their success. I listened to each one, offered advice where I could, and felt grateful that my painful experience might help others avoid the same trap. That night, sitting in my apartment, a nicer one than I could have afforded at my old salary, I thought about the boardroom where this all began. That moment of humiliation that had felt like the end of everything. It had actually been a beginning. Melinda had tried to destroy me. Instead, she'd forced me to become stronger, more vigilant, more confident in my abilities. She'd pushed me out of a company that didn't deserve me and into opportunities I might never have pursued otherwise. I wouldn't thank her for it, but I wouldn't let what she did define me either. My phone buzzed with an email from Patricia. Board meeting next month, they want you to present the Q3 strategy. Congratulations on your first executive-level presentation. I smiled, saved the email, and started preparing. This time, nobody would sabotage my slides. This time, nobody would question my data or undermine my credibility. This time, I was exactly where I belonged, in a place that recognized my value, without me having to fight for basic respect. The promotion Melinda had tried to steal wasn't the one I was meant to have anyway. The universe had better plans. I opened my laptop and began outlining my presentation. No fear, no second-guessing, no looking over my shoulder. Just competence, confidence, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd refused to let someone else's toxicity define my story. In the end, the best revenge wasn't exposing Melinda, though that had been necessary. The best revenge was building a career she could never touch, in a place where my success didn't threaten anyone. The best revenge was choosing myself and never looking back.